And Farai, how are you doing today? Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So really interested to get into the topics today. I think that you have some incredible insights and like really on the front lines in companies, seeing how this whole, AI stuff is playing out and growing, and have a number of questions. But first, would love to hear a little bit about you and some of your background.
Yeah, great. My name is Farai Chidavaenzi, and I'm a director of AI at Slalom based out of our New York office. And my team and I, we do full end-to-end AI from AI strategy all the way through implementation. My particular focus is really on AI governance and responsible AI. So been in the AI space for the better part of the last 5 or 6 years, coming from industry where I worked in the telecommunications space, and then more recently over the last 2 years being on the consulting side of things.
Amazing. Yeah. So you are in the trenches seeing what's going on. And I'm curious, you spend a lot of time with the tech, hands-on with the tech, with customers, seeing, what's working, what's not. But I'm curious from your side, what patterns have stayed consistent? And has AI like fundamentally changed about like transformation challenges, right? Like companies have gone through transformation, whether that was like mobile coming online or the transformation into cloud. Is the AI transformation any different from those kind of previous epochs that we've seen in the industry?
I think we're seeing some similar patterns. So one of the things that we tend to see is that even in the AI world, companies and enterprises are trying to chase the technology. So they're chasing the technology before they fully understand what's going to take to operationalize it. Kind of the same thing that we saw in the data era and the cloud era, in the earlier waves of machine learning. Leaders were seeing what kind of industry peers were doing and were accomplishing, and then immediately focus on trying to get that technology well before they understood the foundational work or the organizational change or even the enterprise transformation that needed to be done before that. So we're, again, continuing to see this. I think one of the biggest things that we're seeing that's different about this moment is the democratization of the technology. I think what we're seeing now is the biggest change is that the ability to create technology and participate in transformation is going into a lot of other places that we haven't typically seen. So for example, a couple of years ago, to build a predictive model, you had to have a PhD with a bunch of data scientists, a couple of weeks to build out those models. Today, you can have a first-year business analyst with the right prompting techniques, access to enough computing resources, and a clear business problem. And then that person could potentially build a prototype in a few hours and then sit an agent on top of that in a couple of days. So I think that's the biggest change. And with that change of introducing new folks to the technology means we're introducing new risks that we haven't seen at the scale before. So I think that is creating challenges for a lot of enterprises as they go towards transformation.
That's interesting, right? Like I guess it makes sense too. Like looking back at my own experience through the years, is that like I guess I haven't really the transformation would happen like I think in pockets, right? With some of like the previous tech innovations that came. I think what you're saying, this is kind of like happening across the board. But I'm curious to dig into that like a little bit, right? Because you mentioned a big thing that a lot of people have been talking about or asking about now is this idea of like risk. Like if you just give this tech to someone at the edge, right, that might have no experience with AI, like there's huge amount of risk there. But like what is that? What is that risk that you're seeing? And like, is there any strategies companies are using to like mitigate that adoption or risk?
The risk is multifaceted. So we were just talking about junior analysts going ahead and producing things. So what we're seeing a lot more now is folks going with the vibe code solutions out to production. So the people that they're asking that are building these technologies and being part of the innovation are really part of the traditional technology, security, data, and governance structures. So while the technology allows them to do these things, they aren't fully aware of what it is they're putting out there. We've had experiences with clients where they've put something in production and didn't realize for a while that it was coded and the security coding wasn't up to snuff and they had these things in the wild. So we're starting to see that risk start to really manifest itself. And then what we're also seeing is, as we all know, AI is really dependent on data. And similar to what we saw in the machine learning days, everybody just thought they could throw technology at the solution without necessarily curating and understanding what their data is. So what we're seeing a lot more now of is AI that's out there that's using data sets that aren't secure, that's using data sets that aren't well vetted, and that is creating an additional risk. And then beyond that, what we're also seeing is the way that we contract and we negotiate and we do business has changed. Now we're seeing procurement have to take a different position than they ever had before. So now they're being asked to understand the DLPAs that are within contracts. They're being asked now to understand more of the contractual obligations and understanding where the third-party partners are for every single part that they're signing up for business with. So now that's creating an additional set of risks. I think companies that are doing this well are taking a governance first approach. I may be a little bit biased, but when you put in the proper governance up front and you govern by design rather than governing by having broken things, you are starting to look at these things more holistically. And while it may feel like it's slowing innovation, it allows you to have guardrails in place that allow you to move faster down the line.
Well, so when you say, because I get like a little tripped up on this from time to time, because like my background is like in tech, and I think that when people think about AI or LLMs, they think tech. And so when I think of like governance, I think of like a, I don't know, like a good CI/CD pipeline, and that in my mind is like governance. But like, is the scope of governance now changing as well when you say like they put in good governance policies?
CI/CD is certainly part of governance that speaks to kind of the AI lifecycle. That's kind of more downstream. But when we think about governance, we start from the top of the house, and that also drives innovation and adoption. So we're looking at the very start, what is the vision for AI? Mm-hmm. Why is it that we are doing AI? What's the strategy behind it? Who are going to be the owners and who's responsible? What kind of approval processes are we going to go through? How do we prioritize use cases against one another? How do we look at every single use case that we have coming through the pipeline and create a repeatable risk assessment for it to ensure that we are covering off on all of the foreseeable risks? And it becomes increasingly more important in this day and age because things are moving so quickly that some of the risks that are out there haven't yet materialized. So we have to start thinking in different ways of what could potentially happen versus what's been seen in the past. And then ultimately, how are we making decisions about budget? How are we making decisions about who gets to use the AI? How are we making decisions around what data classifications and data considerations are we using for our systems? So it becomes a holistic view of, from top to bottom, understanding what we're going to be doing and how we're going to be doing it in the most secure and scalable way possible.
When you go and have that conversation, right, like that idea, because I think that your approach is the correct one in my mind, right? But I feel this like constant tension when I talk to people between like, the media and the hype is that we've got to move faster. Like we should be moving 10x faster. And it's like when you go and have that conversation around setting in these like holistic governance policies and thinking through like why are you really adopting AI, right? Like does that tension come up of like it seems like this is going to slow us down, but in reality it'll speed you up? Or do people kind of are now like understanding that these guardrails and these policies are I don't know I forgot what the saying is, but it's like slow is smooth and smooth is fast type of thing.
So the conversation has probably evolved over the last 6 months to a year and a half, 2 years ago. The conversation was much more difficult because a lot of these risks that we were thinking about hadn't yet materialized. But if we think about where we've been in the last 6 months to a year, we're starting to see real risks manifest in the real world with AI systems. So you have the discussion that people just went through around Mythos. We have the discussion about the issue that just happened with Hugging Face and OpenAI. So those things are starting to manifest themselves, and we're starting to see some of my clients are in the legal world. We're starting to see a lot more lawyers get in trouble for using AI to do their work. So as those risks start to become real, the conversations are starting to become a little bit easier. I think it's very difficult to get, in a cosmic sense, get leaders to be visionaries about what could happen. So as these things are starting to happen that we've been talking about for the last 2 or 3 years, the conversation has drastically shifted. And then we also start to see that it's becoming a lot more cost conscious. So when people are now starting to think about, oh, these tokens are getting increasingly more expensive. I am running rickshaw with these use cases. I'm not seeing the value that I want. Having an understanding and having the right folks at the table up front is now becoming a much more welcome conversation.
And I think you hit on a really interesting point right there too. There's a lot of, I think, ambiguity or evolving discussions, right, on what it means to like measure AI. And I think a lot of times, like, we all we're alive, enjoy the token maxing metric to measure. But it's this idea of coming back to like productivity, because that I think is to some degree the promised land of the tech. So like from your perspective, like are enterprises or you're seeing in the market right now, maybe with your customers or others, are they measuring like the wrong things when they're evaluating AI and transformation? Are they, have you seen any any suggestions on how you kind of actually truly start to measure the impact of this tech as you adopt it?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily think that enterprises are measuring the wrong things. I think the bigger problem is just kind of how they measure them and when they decide to start measuring. And a lot of times in the excitement of doing AI, organizations often rush to identify use cases and stand up pilots. And then about halfway through the initiative, someone asks what the value they're trying to create actually is.
Yeah.
That's kind of when the broad terms such as productivity and efficiency and adoption start getting used without really being clearly defined.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the real question is really, how are we defining productivity and what does that actually mean? How are we measuring it? And even when we talk about efficiency, what's the actual value of the efficiency gain, and kind of how should those gains be weighed against the risks introduced by the system?
Mm-hmm.
So for example, if an AI system is 95% accurate, the important question is not simply whether 95% sounds good, but the real important question is, what is the cost of that 5% it gets wrong? And so if we start measuring those things, that's where we start to really understand how to decide on what makes sense to go forward with versus what we tried and we need to move on to something else.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, that's kind of where that good governance becomes essential. So governance isn't necessarily about controlling the risk after a solution has been built. It should help the organization kind of ask better questions before it decides which use cases to pursue. One of the things that my team and I encourage clients to really establish is robust intake and prioritization processes so that questions are addressed at the beginning. Again, addressing the question 3, 4, 5 weeks into a cycle, you've already lost your ability to baseline, and you've already kind of committed going down a pathway.
Right.
So, you start asking the questions, like, for example, for a software development team, are we measuring productivity as how much more code the developer can release? Or are we measuring the error rate, maintainability, security of that code?
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, for a brand ambassador, are we measuring how many customers that they speak to? Or are we measuring the quality and the depth of those conversations? So oftentimes what we find is people have these ideas of what they want to measure. They release the pilot, they're going through the pilot, and then they realize the thing that they thought they were going to measure to define the success, they don't have the ability to measure. And now they're scrambling to find some backup measure to go after.
I've never, and it's to some degree maybe clicking to somewhat right now, because what I've never seen, right, and I've like gone in, poked around like a lot of companies through past careers, is that I don't think I've ever seen like in a company an existing KPI that's like some productivity metric, right? They have other KPIs, right, for their development teams, a sales team, like their main KPIs are they hitting their bookings targets, are their rev targets, right? As engineers, like hitting delivery dates with like, do they have the correct uptimes and things like that? And so, but I feel like with AI getting shoved down everyone's throat, it all is like mapping back to this almost like ephemeral KPI of productivity that no one has ever really tracked explicitly in the past. So in your, and I'll kind of pressure test this with you, but like, so do you think that maybe a different way to measure AI adoption is like looking at a percent change of like your existing KPIs, right? Like, are your existing KPIs being hit faster now than they were 6 months ago, and use that as a base way to start?
Yeah, that's typically the way that we approach it. And one of the things that we at Slalom have done is we've created an AI value calculator that really does focus on those things of trying to figure out what are the base KPIs that we're looking at. Let's define those upfront, and then let's start to think about what are we actually moving. Sometimes it becomes difficult to understand how much movement is because of the AI. So for example, sometimes you might see KPIs initially dip because people are spending a little bit more time familiarizing themselves with the technology or messing around with the AI, figure out what it can actually do before you start to see kind of those lifts over time.
Sure.
And then some of those KPIs actually become my favorite KPI to really think about that a lot of people often forget about is kind of the value of time. So one of the things that people talk about productivity and efficiency is how many hours people are getting back. So your typical software engineer may be working 55 to 60 hours a week. With the use of technology and the use of AI, we may be able to get that work week down to 35 or 40 hours.
Right.
Now the question is, what are we doing with that additional 15 hours per work week that we're getting back for that individual? And that's the KPI that people are missing out on. So if we use that time well, that can improve the employee satisfaction, that can reduce burnout, and that can strengthen retention. And that matters because replacing experienced employees is expensive. And especially when their knowledge of the organization's data, processes, customers, and operational nuance is critical to making AI effective. So those are like some of the other metrics you start to look at. Am I starting to see reductions in my churn rates? Am I starting to see my badging on Saturday decrease? Those things are kind of the hidden measures to start to define success.
That's insightful. Like the badge in rates on weekends and like after hours is a really fascinating. So it's a way to look at this. So it's not even necessarily like the top line KPIs, but also some of these like ancillary ones that can be good leading indicators to like, this is working pretty better. And like the other thing I always wonder too is that if you're a software developer working 55 hours a week and you use AI to go down to 35, will you continue working 50 hours and just get more stuff shoveled onto your plate? Or are you actually going off and spending time with your family or something?
And that becomes a challenge for leaders because I think the knee-jerk reaction for leaders is, if I'm getting time back, let me go ahead and pile more things on. So we've seen in our client work, some say, let's find more things to do. Others say, oh, let's take some stuff off the plate. And others also find that the AI didn't necessarily make anybody more efficient. It highlighted the inefficiencies that are already there. So it kind of forced people to work a little bit different, a little bit better, a little bit more efficiently, X of the AI itself.
Interesting. Well, so on the like in the events that you've been there with, customers that have said, okay, great, we're getting time back, we should let our employees go home early, versus customers that have said, great, we've got time back, we can do more now. Like in the instance where people get to go home early, do you see that type of policy like driving adoption of the tech, right? Because I could see on some side where if it's like, great, I'm working 50 hours a week and now I only have to work 35. Oh no, I'm just getting more work, is almost like would cause me to like reject the tech. It's like, this is a negative externality that makes me not want to use it.
Yeah, both in the software example and broadly speaking, my view and my experience with AI is the greatest adoption is when you're able to connect it to what is in it for me. So there's a tendency and a fear that folks have in adopting the technology that says the AI is going to make me more of a computer. And the way that we've always approached it is AI, when done right, allows people to be more human. So it allows you to take away the things that kind of get in the way of people doing the things that they enjoy and the parts of the job that they find the most meaningful for them. And by letting AI kind of fine tune those areas and target those areas, then folks are able to enjoy their work more, gain more efficiency, and then find new ways to use the technology. I think where innovation truly happens, in my experience, innovation doesn't come from the top down, it comes from the bottom up. So when people that are doing the work day to day are interested and they're excited and they're seeing that this technology is actually making their lives and their work and their experience better, they're going to go out there and find those cases that the executives may not know about to actually apply AI to and come up with really innovative solutions that are going to drive top line and bottom line KPIs across the board. And that's where that real innovation happens. But if it's just kind of, oh, this is a use case that we think and we feel is a good idea, that's also where we start to see some of those things kind of falter of, yeah, the executive thought it was a good idea. It really isn't a business problem. It's too esoteric for most users. It only applies to one department. But when it's thought through from a strategic standpoint of let's start at what people are actually trying to get away from doing, then I think, again, keep going back to software development. One of the key things where AI has been great and shown a lot of productivity and a lot of efficiency gains is in documentation. A lot of software developers hate doing documentation. I hate doing documentation. So being able to lean on the AI to do that last little bit ensures that you actually have the documentation. It shows value to the end user and it shows value to the enterprise because now you have a fully documented solution. Whereas a lot of software that's out there, a lot of technology that's out there, the documentation is subpar at best, and the person that built it has long since left the company. So that's creating some tech debt for companies that AI is able to solve, and also helps engineers to do the thing that they don't want to do anyway.
Yeah, I can resonate with the hating to write documentation. It's the worst. But back at so from a strategic side, right? Or I think you've got a unique view because you're at one end, kind of like the outside looking into these org, but at the same time, you're very much embedded, so it can see the day to day. So you have this, I think, a very unique point of view. And so in your experience and what you've seen kind of, I guess, across customers is how much of AI adoption, AI transformation, whatever you want to call it, success actually comes down to organizational politics, incentives, change management versus the tech itself. Because I've heard some arguments of saying, well, AI adoption will get better when the tech gets better. And is that kind of a cop-out answer, or are there other factors at play that is driving success at customers that you've seen be better successful?
This will probably come as no surprise, but I think AI transformation is ultimately all about the people. So if people believe in the vision, they understand the strategy, they trust the tools, they can see how AI will improve their day-to-day work, the transformation will happen. When they don't, even the strongest technical strategy, the strongest technology will struggle. So I think what we're seeing in the best AI leaders in transformation programs are the ones that put people at the center. They don't begin with the models or the platforms, the infrastructure. They begin with understanding how people work, what skills they already have, what frustrates them, and what will make the technology feel useful rather than disruptive. So recently I was working with a client in the early stage of AI transformation, and the organization was evaluating 2 hyperscalers for its future infrastructure. On paper, one option appeared to have a slightly better financial advantage. But after speaking with the technical users, the end users, it was clear to me and to the leader that the other platform was better enterprise decision. It aligned more closely with the skills that the organization already had, the tools that people understood, and the way the team were accustomed to working. So the CIO made a very thoughtful decision. She did not simply select the technology that looked the best on paper in a spreadsheet, but she selected the technology that her people could successfully adopt, operate, and build upon. I think that's the difference. So organizational politics, ownership debates, misalignment of initiatives will always be part of major transformation. But AI creates new questions about who owns the strategy, who owns the data, the platforms, the risk, and the resulting value. But those issues become much easier to navigate when people and the employees understand what it is they're in for, what's in it for them. So when people see AI that can remove work that they generally don't want to do, it reduces administrative burden, helps them make better decisions. So again, it's not really about the technology. The technology will always be there. It's about the technology that is going to be best adopted by the folks that are using it. And again, when I was in the industry, made a similar decision between we had a committed spend and we had another tool set that we wanted to use, and looking at who was going to be using it, it made so much more sense. And that allowed us to move a lot faster because we weren't spending, an extra 15 hours a week reading documentation and not understanding how to use CLIs. We were actually spending our time using technology in ways that made sense to us.
I mean, I think that's an excellent point, because a lot of the literature, and you're a lot closer to this than I have, so it's good to hear that the message is resonating, is that the companies that are having the best time adopting are taking that human first approach, and they're not just like writing the MSAs they already have. It's like, just because you have Salesforce and Salesforce has an AI and you have an existing MSA with them, like, you don't have to go with them. They might not be the best option. And just because you're tied into Microsoft, you don't have to just go to Copilot. Like, see what tools are actually the best ones to solve the work that your people are doing first, and then get the tools for that, and not just try to like tag on riders to existing contracts because it seems easier. So that's great to hear that the fellow researchers out there are true. But
it's becoming an increasingly complex conversation, though, because integration across partners is becoming a little bit more difficult. So I think that is changing the conversation as well. Of, yes, you don't necessarily have to go with Salesforce, but part of the calculus on understanding the value is what is the cost to do the integration versus the cost to upskill your folks in a different skill set.
Mm-hmm. The ecosystem mode thing that will become a thing. But like, I'm curious your side too. Is that so? I know we're getting close to time here, and I know that your time is important. But like, so looking 5 years down the road, I always love to think about this. So 5 years from now, like, what assumptions about AI within the enterprise do you think that we'll look back on as like a fundamental mistake, or maybe something that like right now seems like the best way, but in 5 years we'll be like, oh wow, look at us humans, so dumb. Like,
the one I've been grappling with lately is the idea that I think we're going to see a bit of a pause and a recollection in the AI moment. I think everybody just assumes that over the next decade, AI is just going to continue to grow at the incremental pace it's been, at the exponential rate it's been growing at. But I think that we're kind of in a moment now where we're going to see that kind of flatten out for a little bit while people start to reassess and start to figure out what's next. I think right now we are seeing a lot of folks chasing a multitude of hype cycles. But I think that's going to kind of stop us for a little bit while companies that have actually made the true investments kind of sit on their laurels a little bit and see that investment start to collect and then understand what's next. I think we're all in this moment where we're continuing saying like, yeah, that seems kind of cool with AI technology, but I don't know if we really need that. So I think we're going to see a lot more of those discussions. And then the interesting conversation I've been having lately with a lot of our clients is around the idea of, we think everybody wants to be an early adopter and wants to kind of be a pace setter. But increasingly, I'm having conversations around folks that really just want to be fast followers. They kind of want to slow down a little bit, see what other people are doing, see what's working for them, what's not working for them, and then kind of pick and choose from that, as opposed to blazing these crazy trails. So I think those would be kind of the patterns that we'll see over the next 5 years. Like, I don't really see that physical AI is going to take off in any material way. But I think we're going to just see a plateau over the next 2 or 3 years while people catch up, and then also people start to think about what actually makes sense on a go-forward basis.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. Well, thank you so much for stopping by today. This was really good insight, right? And again, I love your position and your point of view, because you have that outsider looking in kind of objective view, but then you're also kind of behind the lines over there and seeing firsthand what's going on. So getting equal parts, I think, is absolutely incredible. So thank you so much for coming by. So I give everyone an opportunity at the end too to plug something if they want. So do you have any interesting work, any articles, any research, anything Slalom's doing that you want to give a shout out to?
Slalom always has a bevy of articles on our blog. We're always debating very interesting things. So I think the latest one I wrote was unpacking the memory within AI systems at an enterprise scale. I think it's one of my favorite articles to understand, there was that trend that was going around for a while about what AI remembers about you. So we did a little bit of unpacking of that, of what that actually means in the enterprise setting. It's cool when it's, give me a character of myself, but probably a little less so when it's, remembering the intern from last summer and that now becomes your company voice. So we got a couple articles on that, and then been doing a lot of thought pieces lately on kind of the cyber security aspect of AI agents. So again, the Slalom blog has a lot of really great thought pieces out there for folks to kind of sink their teeth into.
Amazing. Well, man, thank you so much for stopping by. Until we chat next time I'm back up in New York, make sure we'll give you a ring. But thank you again.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.
That is it for today. So that was Farai stopping by from Slalom. Really good insights. Again, I think that as we look more and more, the conversation's going away from how does this tech work? Is this tech capable? Into our organizations actually able to change and take the human perspective when it comes to adopting this. So thank you all for stopping by Shift Tab. And until next time, I'm Cory, your host, and we'll chat again soon.